Awesome. So I'm here chatting with Jimmy Whelan, who is currently in quarantine in Sydney, but fresh back from the Giro a week ago. So how's the food in quarantine for you? Like you just said that you're at the Hilton. So what's the last thing that you had to eat or drink there?
It's a bit of a different setup to what I'm used to. I think there's maybe 200 people here at the Hilton in quarantine, and we're pretty fortunate. We have the restaurant that's part of the Hilton providing the food for us. So the food's actually been really good. Um, yeah, it's been a really good standard. I've heard other horror stories of people having to eat airplane food for 2 weeks essentially. But the food here is nice. It's restaurant standard food, so it's nice to be eating well.
But
Makes it a little bit easier.
Do they deliver it to your room, or do you have to go? You can't leave your room, presumably.
No. So I can't leave my room. So at 8 o'clock, 12 p.m. and 6 p.m., breakfast, lunch, and dinner is knocked on my door in a cardboard box. And then I grab it, open the door, grab it. And that's the only time I see human life is the security guard 2 doors down.
And the portion sizes, how are the portion sizes compared to what you'd normally have to eat?
Well, they're actually appropriate to what I'm doing right now, which is just laying down in bed watching Netflix all day, every day. So the portion sizing is quite small, but it's actually appropriate for what I'm doing right now. But if I was riding yoga here, I'd almost need triple the amount of food, I think. Yeah.
If you were stuck on a desert island, like what sort of foods can you not live without? Foods or drinks could you not live without normally?
I'm a big yogurt man.
Yeah.
Eggs, fish. If I'm on a desert island, I could probably try and find fish. But big fan of eggs, fish, yogurt. They're probably my biggest three. And oats. Yeah. And oats. Oats is my main fuel source when I'm training. They're probably my top four. Okay. And blueberries too. I'm a big fan of blueberries.
Like fresh or frozen or both?
Fresh on. No, it depends. Both, I guess. Yeah, I really like frozen berries during the summer. Yeah.
And so, like the Giro, so you just got back from the Giro, and that was your first Grand Tour. Like, how did you find that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a new experience in so many ways. Physically, I guess from a nutrition standpoint, it was really interesting to see how my body would cope, whether my current processes of eating was appropriate for 3 weeks, whether I could sustain, good gut health, whether I could I don't know the technical word for it. I'm sure that when you maintain your appetite. One thing I learned was.
Did you find your appetite changed at all?
No, I found that a lot of the chef on our team said a lot of riders usually struggle in the last week to enjoy eating or just to want to eat in the first place. It becomes quite lethargic and quite annoying to have to eat so much every day. But I actually found that with the right foods, I was able to have a healthy relationship with food whilst I was racing, which was actually really good. But I kept it pretty simple. Mostly rice, eggs, and avocado. And then if I wanted to change it up a little bit, I'd have a little bit of oats.
That's for breakfast, before the race, you mean?
Yeah. So the pre-race meal would always be rice, eggs, avocado, oil, salt and pepper. And if I was feeling like I wanted a bit of flavor on top, I'll put sriracha on it. But that was a pretty common theme amongst the riders. Not only within our team, but every other team too. Rice is pretty universal. It can serve you pretty well on a Grand Tour in terms of, just not making you too bloated with the amount of carbs we need to eat. Keeping it simple with the proteins, easy to digest. We still had a really big variety of food for dinner. good proteins, veggies. Then
So
on the climbing stages,
you had more of the vegetables in the evenings and bits and pieces.
Yeah, in the evening. Yeah. And there's some guys that actually just go low on vegetables for the whole Grand Tour. They try and get the main key macros in, and they'll take supplements to try and boost their other nutrients that they might not be getting because they're eating less vegetables. But there was a lot of days, the amount of climbing that we had on some days, like the night before, we would do the low residue diet as well.
Yeah.
So we'd have a juice blender that would do our greens for us, so we didn't have any fiber, so we could drink it. And then, because you didn't really want to be stripping back too much on the nutrients, because that's when you start getting sick.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting. Just not only for myself, but just observing what the other riders were eating. And there's not one way to go around. There's not like one right answer. It's very individual.
Oh, 100%, I suppose. And then part of that is then figuring out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And did you, because like, what were you eating during each of the stages? Did that change like throughout the week, or did you do different things on different days?
Yeah, it depended on the type of stage. There weren't many flat days where it was quite easy in the bunch. But typically, there's a few stages where we might have 100K that was kind of chill. And I'd make sure that I wouldn't eat gels during that period. I'd eat whole foods, so bananas or even just the rice cakes. Most of the Giro I felt like it was so hard and so intense for so much of it that I was eating gels most of the time, just because it's so easy on the stomach, fast to absorb, and it's also easy just to quantify what you're putting in, and therefore whether you're consuming the right amount.
Like how many gels would you have on a stage?
Basically per hour, say a moderately intense hour, I try and have maybe 3 gels, but I'd usually try and do maybe 2 gels and a rice and a bar or a rice cake. I'd usually try and steer clear of the muesli bars, and I'd actually just try and stick with bananas, rice cakes, and gels. I just found that was better on my stomach. I think a lot of the bars, they're a lot higher in fat, so they take longer to absorb. And over 3 weeks, if you do it every day, it makes that small difference can add up. Yeah. So,
did you have any, like with having so many gels, did you have any times where you had any gut issues or stomach issues from that?
No, I was pretty good. I've heard of riders who can't get the amount of gels they need. So they almost need to carbo load intensely before they need to really get the carbs in. So they kind of, like an hour before their real efforts, they've got to make sure that they're not in any sort of deficit, just to make sure that they can do the intense effort. But I'm pretty good. I have a pretty good stomach in terms of that. I can cope with just about anything. Which is good.
Did you, like, when you got home from the Giro, were there any foods that you were then craving that you just couldn't wait to be able to eat again once you finished?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. We kind of had a few pizzas on the second last day before the final time trial, because we didn't have a celebratory dinner that evening after the time trial because of COVID. We all had our exit plans and we went our own ways. So we actually had a pretty large dinner the night before the TT, the final time trial, and we had pizza. And I noticed like the amount of cheese that was on the pizza, and after eating so clean for 3 weeks, that really threw my stomach around.
Oh, really?
And so I actually found myself in Girona later that evening, like not that hungry at all, because I've just bloated myself with pizza, which was amazing. But it was quite a shock to the system.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was just looking forward to not being in a hotel more than anything. It's just also just cooking for myself is one of the nicest things after a Grand Tour. I found, after doing nothing for 3 weeks other than riding a bike, it was nice to kind of feel like an adult again, I guess.
Yeah. So you like, being able to not have to rely on other people to feed you.
Yeah, which during the Grand Tour is absolutely necessary. But when you come home, it's nice to just cook some home meals. And I mean, for me, like, I love cooking an omelette at home, for example. Roasting veggies and fish in the oven, for example. Just the simple things. Yeah.
Because if you don't have the energy to cook, like, what would be your default go-to meal? Many people probably don't know that we shared a house together, so we lived together. Had a house, during lockdown for 10 months.
Yeah.
And so I know what Jimmy eats. I know he eats really, really well.
Yeah, Gemma has almost all the answers anyway.
So I've got a bit of behind the scenes knowledge, so I know what some of his default foods are. I know. Yeah. I knew the yogurt was a big thing. I knew oats a big thing, because he'd always be eating oats.
Yeah.
And chia pudding. I got him into chia pudding as well.
Chia puddings are great. Yeah.
But what would you say is your default? Like, I don't have to think about what am I going to eat for dinner cooking meal.
My lazy man's comfort food, but still healthy, is just like eggs on toast with avocado. Just your classic Melbourne breakfast, I guess, these days. Yeah, pretty simple, and it gets all the macros you need, I guess, if I'm training that day or the day after. Yeah, good piece of sourdough. Hits the spot usually.
Yeah, we used to get through a lot of bread.
Yeah,
my bread intake definitely shot up when I was sharing the house with you.
Yeah.
More bread than I needed eating, but it was good. One of the other dishes I probably would have said you made a lot was you had roasting vegetables, and it'd be just whatever vegetables were in the house.
Yeah.
But particularly either fish or prawns, that would and to make like a big veggie bowl. That's probably that's what you're making very frequently.
That was a massive habit that I got into, particularly during the quarantine. I think maybe 6 nights a week I'd do the same dinner, basically. I'd be training twice a day on the ergo, or once a day for a while, and then it was essentially like a poke bowl with roast veggies, protein and quinoa or rice, or I'd always try and like make them look fancy, just because why not?
Well, I think that's one of the things with food. Like it when it looks appealing, it just helps with the senses. And it makes it taste better because it looks better, and so it doesn't really take that long to make it like decorative on a plate. I was always like, why don't you cook dinner for me, Jimmy?
It was it's interesting, like even in this situation here with the quarantine, like we have reasonably nice food, but it's all in takeaway containers, plastic cutlery. So the first thing I did was I went online and ordered a real plate, a real bowl, real cutlery. And so every time I get the meals delivered, I put it onto my plate, and it makes a world of difference just eating off a plate that's presented nicely versus what feels like eating out of airplane food.
That's a really good piece of advice. And because I just assumed that they would have given you a plate and a knife and a fork, and
no, because they wanted everything that goes into the room to be thrown out for COVID protocol reasons. So it makes sense. But I just wash my bowl and plate after each meal.
Yeah,
it's not like I'm struck for time here, so it's a good way to add an extra 20 minutes of my day to wash my dishes.
Very good. And because you came into before you were a cyclist, you were a runner, and like, is there any big differences that you found between the way that you fuel in training and in racing from when you're running versus now when you're cycling?
Yeah, I mean, during high school, I didn't really think about my diet. I was just still eating basically what I was at school, still eating what like mum and dad fed the family, kind of thing. But then once I started going to university and started competing at a higher level in running, I did start to play around with my nutrition a bit. But I didn't think about it anywhere near as much as I do with my cycling now, which is interesting. I'm not sure why that is. I think it's maybe like a cultural thing with the sports. I know with runners, even some of the most professional runners, they still eat healthy, generally healthy, but they're nowhere near as obsessed with what they eat as some professional cyclists are. So yeah, I mean, when I was running well as in my uni days, running at national level, I didn't think about the specifics of whether I was getting the right macros before a competition. I was just eating what I thought was correct, but it was never crunching numbers, which now that I look back on it, could have been a massive gain without too much effort.
Because do you find that you're thinking about food and nutrition a lot more now then?
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe that's because a cycling event goes for so long and it's such a complex sport to get right from a nutrition point of view, in terms of like energy interplay, training in the stomach, because it's a pretty extreme thing to do. And then also weight too. It's there's a lot of variables to consider. But the most important thing is just to maintain a healthy relationship with food. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, to wrap up, I've got a list of would you rather foods. So I want to know, would you rather coffee or tea?
Always coffee.
Yeah. Well, I can vouch for that. Wine or beer?
Wine.
Chocolate or chips?
Oh, chocolate, I think, yeah.
In a race, would you rather have gels or solids?
Solids. Yeah.
Still or sparkling water?
Sparkling, always.
Mild or spicy food?
I've been getting into the spicy food for the first time in my life. So I'm going to say spicy. It used to always be mild, but now spicy, I think.
Excellent. Starter or dessert?
Starter.
Pasta or rice?
Rice.
Fruit or vegetables?
Veggies, yeah.
Steak or seafood?
Oh, seafood, yeah.
And the last one, burger or pizza?
Definitely burger.
Yeah.
Not much of a pizza man.
No? Unless you're in Italy.
Unless I'm in Italy, yeah, exactly.
At the end of the Giro.
Yeah. Just one thing to add as well. One thing I really tried to take note during the Giro was not consuming too much caffeine. Okay. So I actually tried to limit myself to maximum 2 coffees before the race. And sometimes if it was a really important stage where I was having caffeine during the stage, I would have no coffee in the morning. And that was a tip given by, or shared by most guys, saying that it's easy to drink too much coffee during a Grand Tour, and then if you load that up with caffeine during the race, it can actually throw you off a lot. So it was interesting, really trying to like taper back on my caffeine intake, because typically you have one at breakfast, and then you'll have one when you go up to your room, and then maybe you'll have one on the bus, and then you'll have one before you start, and then you've had 4 coffees every morning, and that's not good for you.
And then
so that's one thing as well.
Gels, then a couple of caffeine gels, you buzz all night.
Yeah. And even like you choose your stages when to have a caffeine gel, because you'd be having the caffeine gel at 5 p.m. And essentially, if you have that gel, it's good because you're going to feel better in the race, but you're going to, it'll sacrifice your quality of sleep that night. So yeah, there's one extra thing.
Yeah, no, good tip to think about, like what, not just what you're doing today, but also what are you doing tomorrow, and how does what you do today affect tomorrow?
Yeah, and I can also talk about the hydration as well, if you want.
Okay, yeah, no, of course, go ahead.
So our team doctor every morning, before we went down to breakfast, we'd have this little pea pot thing. We'd have to provide a sample, and he would do hydration levels every morning, and we would monitor throughout the race. It was pretty crazy how dehydrated you get without realizing. So that was pretty interesting just to see for the first time how dehydrated I probably have done so many stages previously in other races.
So
I really had to drink more.
Then change how you were drinking throughout the stages?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was just drinking water in the morning. I would usually never have water. I wouldn't think about it. Just having a cup, like a big glass of water for breakfast, and then on the bus before the stage, you have a bottle with a salt tab, and you do that every stage, and that kind of sorted me out. But there's some guys that have to
starting hydrated, but rather than starting dehydrated.
Yeah. And there was a few hot. I mean, in the Giro it wasn't that hot for the last 2 weeks, but the first week it was hot in Sicily, so it was important to stay on top of our hydration. But yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you very much for your time. It was good having a chat with you. And we'll catch up with you next time.
Cool. Thanks. Cheers.